Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shalom on this Shabbat, not the seventh day of the week, but one of the fall feast days, the Feast of Booths. So on this particular session, as we had said we were going to do, we were going to spend most of this week looking at in detail the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths. So we're going to continue with that meditation and go ahead and do a quick review of what we're looking at. So I'm going to pull up Numbers chapter 29, where it talks about the Feast of Tabernacles, and just so that we can be reminded, Numbers chapter 29 is a rehearsal of the fall feast days. So it starts with the Feast of Trumpets on the first day of the seventh month, and then it goes to the 10th day of the seventh month, which is the Day of Atonement. We talked about that. And then we come to the Feast of Tabernacles, that begins on the 15th day of the seventh month, as it says in verse 12 of Numbers chapter 29. You are to hold a sacred assembly. You must not do any regular work, and you shall observe a feast to Yahweh for 7 days. And so we're in the midst of those 7 days. And then it tells the children of Yasharel what to do, how to commemorate, and what to use. So we've been talking about this now for 4 sessions. I'm not going to read all of it, but I do want to start with these first few verses, starting at verse 13. It says, as a pleasing aroma to Yahuwah, you are to present a food offering, a burnt offering of 13 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all unblemished, along with the grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, with each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 of an ephah or ephah with each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 of an ephah with each of the 14 lambs. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering, and then it says, and drink offering. That's what we're going to be focused on in this meditation. So this happened on the first day, and then on the second day, the instructions are given, the third day, etc., etc. The only major difference between one day and another is when it comes to how many of the young bulls are to be sacrificed and presented to the Most High. The first day there are 13, the second day there are 12, the third day there are 11, the fourth day 10, the fifth day 9, the sixth day 8, on the seventh day 7, and then on the 8th day 1. Okay, so we talked about that in detail in the last session, but on each one of these days, what we haven't talked about, which is what we're going to cover on this session, is this last item that keeps being mentioned. And it says in verse 13, the very last thing is a drink offering. So that's what we're going to be focusing our attention on as we move in the blessing that the Father has given us for this session. So let's start with the drink offerings in Yasharel, or in Israel. As we mentioned, each one of those days, a drink offering was given. So we're going to look at the importance of the drink offering for this meditation. First of all, where were the drink offerings given? And that goes to, again, the heart of the nation of Yasharel. All of these things happened in relationship to the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting. That's where all the sacrifices happened. That's where all of the worship occurred and how the worship occurred. So the drink offerings were a part of that cultural activity. I'm saying cultural rather than religious, because the heart and soul of Yasharel was not a religion. It was a way that the Most High created for his people to be with him at all times. And he, talking about the Most High God of Yasharel, to be with Yasharel at all times. So that is what the tabernacle, which then turned into the temple, was. So literally the heart and the soul of the nation happened in and around the tabernacle, or the temple. So when we're looking at the things that happened in the temple, we're looking at sacrifices, we're looking at offerings, we're looking at whether that be a wave offering, or a pouring out offering, or a sprinkling of blood offering. Whatever it was an offering given to manifest the relationship that the Most High had with his nation. So the drink offerings were very much a part of that, which is why we're going to be spending some time on it. Because as I was doing these studies in times past, I never focused on the drink offerings. It was always about the sacrifice of the bull, or the ram, or the lamb, or the goat, some incense, but never the drink offering. So the Spirit wants us to see the entire picture. So, as I said, and I didn't read all of those scriptures starting at Numbers chapter 29, verse 13. At the end of each one of those days, the drink offering was part of what the Most High had given Yasharel to do. And so, where were drink offerings given? They were given at the tabernacle, or the temple. They were poured out beside the altar of burnt offering. And if you remember, the altar of burnt offering was right outside of the holy place. This represents where the drink offerings were given. The second bullet point seems to be in contradiction with the third bullet point, but actually it's not. As the first bullet point says, this all happened at the tabernacle, or the temple, and the drink offerings were poured out beside the altar of burnt offering. It's a phrase in the second bullet point of never in the holy place. There is an example in Numbers, the previous chapter, Numbers 28, verse 7, which says, in the holy place you shall pour out a drink offering of strong drink to Yahuwah. That should have read in a holy place, because a holy place was the altar outside. They were given during the daily burnt offerings, which is found in Exodus 29 and Numbers 28. They were given on the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat, Numbers 28 again, verses 9 and 10. They were given in the festival offerings, or the times of meeting, the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, which is Pentecost, and now the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles. That's found in Numbers 28 and 29. And they were also given as with vows and free will offerings. That's found in Numbers chapter 15, verses 1 through 10. And finally, in peace offerings, or the Thanksgiving meals. So what is this showing us? It's showing us that whenever the Most High is worshiped, a drink offering is part of the worship, just as the daily burnt offerings, or the offerings of free will, the offerings of when a person makes a vow, peace offerings, anytime. See, all of these are acts of worship. We talked about this briefly a couple of sessions ago. But when you went into the temple, you went with purpose, or when you went to the temple or the tabernacle, you went with purpose. The purpose was to fulfill the Most High's instructions to stay in fellowship with the Most High. And in every case, you had to bring something with you. Most of the time, what you brought was the best that you had. It was of the best that you had, and that's what you gave to the Most High. Now, the Most High doesn't need any food. The Most High doesn't need any drink. What ends up happening is the people who work in the temple complex are the ones who are the receivers of the things that the people in the surrounding area, whether it be Jerusalem or those who are coming into Jerusalem, when they bring their gifts, when they bring their offerings, all of that that's not burnt up goes to support the work of the ministry of service to the Most High, which means the tribe of Levi, and specifically the sons of Aaron, because they were the priest who actually facilitated all of the offerings and the sacrifices. It was only the sons of Aaron that could do that, and the sons of Aaron were part of a tribe called the tribe of Levi, and it was the tribe of Levi that was charged with all parts that supported that work, to the point that when the land was divided up between all of the 12 sons, or the 12 tribes, the tribe of Levi didn't get their own land. The land, so therefore, if they didn't have their own land, they couldn't raise their own food. So the food that they ate, and just about everything else that happened with them, was given to them in this process. See, that's the context that tithes and offerings are given. The tithes and offerings go to the Most High. The Most High then empowers the tribe of Levi and the sons of Aaron to use that which has been given to sustain themselves and their families. So they all had a place to stay, but the land didn't belong to them. That land was a part of the temple or the tabernacle complex. They lived in and around that complex. So that's the backdrop for the sacrificial goings on in the nation. And as I have said on numerous occasions, that was the heart and the soul of the nation. It all happened there at the tabernacle, because the Most High said, I'll meet you there whenever I need to instruct you, whenever I need to chastise you, if I need to forgive you, if I need to show mercy to you, it's all going to be happening through the tabernacle. So when we, in this season, are commemorating the Feast of Tabernacles, we begin to get a sense of how important that Feast of Tabernacles is, because it is directly related to our relationship with the Most High. And now, in the context of this study or this meditation, the drink offering was part of all of that. Okay, it was part of the daily burnt offerings. It was part of the keeping of the weekly Shabbat. It was part of the major feast. It was a part of the vows and the free will offerings and the peace offerings. So whenever the Most High's people came into that tabernacle or into that temple, they were giving a drink offering. Okay, what was used in drink offerings? Because they were using wine. Okay, and as it says in this first bullet point, it says sometimes called strong drink. Whenever wine was used in scripture, when you think about it, it had to be strong drink because it was fermented grape juice. All right. So I don't know what your relationship with grape juice is, but it doesn't last long as grape juice. The process begins, the fermentation process begins almost immediately. In Yasharel, they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have freezers. So what they did have, whether it be food or drink, was either immediately consumed or it was preserved in a way that it could be used. I know we don't usually think about this, but the process of fermentation is actually a preservation process, which is why you can drink wine that has been around for decades, but you can't drink grape juice that's been around for decades. It will ferment. Okay. It will protect itself, in other words. Okay. So this is what was used in the tabernacle. This is what was used in the tent of meeting and then the temple, when the temple was built. Strong drink. So when you see strong drink in the scriptures, it's talking about fermented grape juice or basically wine. It's talking about wine. The quantities. When you were offering a lamb, as the lamb was being slaughtered and killed, whether it was sacrificed and burnt as a burnt offering, or whether it was taken and eaten by the priest, whenever that happened, 1 quart of wine was poured out. Okay. If it was a ram, 1 1/3 quarts was poured out. If it was a bull, 2 quarts was pulled out. So what was the purpose? The purpose of the wine is a symbol of joy and fellowship. I'm going to read the 104th Psalm in verse 15. Well, actually, I'm not going to read the whole Psalm, but it starts out in verse 1 saying, "Bless Yahuwah, O my soul. O Yahuwah, my Elohim, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty. You cover yourself with light as with a garment, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain." And then it goes on. So it's a psalm exalting our Heavenly Father. Okay. And it talks about lots of things. He laid the foundations of the earth. He covered the earth as a garment with the waters, et cetera, et cetera. Then in verse 13, it says, he waters the hills from his chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of his works. Verse 14, he causes the grass to grow for the cattle and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. And then verse 15 says, and wine that makes glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face to shine, and bread which strengthens man's heart. So in verse 15, wine is seen as a blessing, and it's supposed to make our hearts glad. That's the purpose of the wine, and that's a part of worship. So it's the purpose of the drink offerings is to be a symbol of the joy or the gladness and the fellowship with our Creator. It's also an act of total surrender, because when the wine is poured, it's fully poured out. Okay, so when the drink offering is poured, the entire content is poured out. Now that's a little bit different than what we used to do on the street corners when somebody would go get the wine bottle, and the first thing they would do is pour out a little for the homies that aren't here. Okay, but we only poured out a little. When you worship the Most High, you pour the whole thing out. Okay, the whole thing belongs to Him. Some of us would have had a problem with that. But what we were doing, we actually got it from this that you're looking at. Okay, so another part of the purpose, the completeness of sacrifice. Okay, so there was the burnt offering, which is the flesh, the grain offering, which is the bread. Does this sound familiar? The drink offering, which was the wine. And again, well, first of all, the burnt offering or the flesh has to do with the body. The grain offering or the bread has to do with sustenance. The drink offering or the wine has to do with the joy of the Spirit. And then finally, thanksgiving for the land's produce. So at this point, let me bring you back to when this happened. This happened in all of the feast. This happened on every Shabbat. This happened at the morning sacrifice. This happened on the daily basis. This happened at the morning sacrifice and the evening sacrifice. It also happened when the new moon was seen. So whenever the act of worship occurred, the drink offering was a part of it. Now, having said that, although we're talking about the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, hearken back to Passover, and more specifically to Pesach, which was for the people of the Most High who believe in the Messiah, and the completion of the purpose of Passover. Remember, on the day of preparation, when they went into the upper room, Yeshua took bread, right, the sustenance, broke it, and then he said, "This is my body." See, he was bringing them back to the whole sacrificial protocol that his people had been living their entire existence as a nation. So he was letting his disciples know, no, you don't have to make a burnt offering of flesh anymore. This bread represents my body. And that's why he said it's broken for you. And then he said, this cup is the cup of the New Testament in my blood. Wine, it comes from grapes. It comes from the blood of grapes. Y'all, it was always talking about when he said that, he was talking about the wine. He never was saying you need to drink my physical blood, even when he said that to the people, and so many of them just walked away from him. The reason they walked away is because they didn't understand their own culture. He was talking about wine. And so what he was saying is, this is the cup, your cup of a new covenant that is made with my wine. Okay. So that it should bring joy to you, because now the covenant is complete the way it's supposed to be. All of that is understood when the drink offering is poured out. The drink offering that our ancestors offered in the wilderness was a shadow of the drink offering that Yeshua said, "This is my blood of the new covenant," or "This is the wine that I'm bringing for the new covenant." Okay. And all of this is in thanksgiving, because the Most High will always produce for his people what his people need. 100% of the time he does that when his people are operating in the blessing that he has given to us. So if we find ourselves in lack, this is how we get back to being in abundance. Find the center of his will. And so that drink offering is a part of that. Later on, the symbolism. The prophets, they would condemn the idolatrous libations of the people. That's found in Psalm 16. Let me turn to that too. Psalm 16, verse 4. Their sorrows shall be multiplied that hasten after other gods. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer, nor take up their names unto my lips. See, what our people have always misunderstood our relationship with the Most High. The Most High never told us to drink blood. As a matter of fact, he told us just the opposite. Don't drink blood. So when Yeshua said, "Unless you drink my blood and eat my flesh, you don't have any part with me," he couldn't have been talking about the blood that runs through our veins. He had to have been talking about how the symbolism of what happens in the act of worship with the drink offering. So the prophets were condemning the idolatrous libations that our forefathers were engaged in, and that's what Psalm 16 verse 4 is talking about. And then Paul, when he says, "I am already being poured out as a drink offering," in 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 6, it's the same thing. He's understanding and he is manifesting the fullness of this act of worship, the sacrificial system that the Most High put in his people to remind us of our relationship with our Creator. And of course, the Messiah, wine poured out, foreshadowed his pouring out of his blood. But it was never to be drunk. The blood was never to be drunk. The wine symbolized the joy of the Most High. And that's in Luke 22, verse 20. Okay, so in summary, when drink offerings were required, they were required daily, in the morning and the evening when the lambs were slain. They were required weekly on the Shabbat, and with extra offerings. They were required at all of the feast days, the Passovers, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Booths. Again, the Feast of Weeks being Pentecost, the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles, which is what we're in the midst of now. When we would make our own vows, bringing free will offerings, the drink offering was poured there, and then peace offerings with Thanksgiving meals. We didn't talk about this because we're talking about it in relationship to the Feast of Weeks. But before this week is out, we are going to look at this thing about Thanksgiving meals. See, because everything originates in these scriptures that we have been reading in Numbers 29, in Deuteronomy 23, Leviticus 23. everything centers around worship, and worship happens from the heart of the nation, which is the tabernacle. And the heart of the tabernacle, as I keep saying over and over again, is the word of the Most High. In other words, it's being in fellowship with what Yah has said. So that's what all of these things are about. And that's where we'll end the lesson for this session, for this meditation. Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.